About me. My name is Emily Parker, and I'm 35 years old. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, but moved to Seattle after graduating from college at 22. Seattle felt like a place of promise. Its shimmering gray waters, the moody clouds, the energy of innovation. And somehow, I fell in love with the city as quickly as I fell in love with my future husband, John. I come from a middle-class family. My mom was a nurse, my dad a high school math teacher. They raised me with a strong sense of right and wrong, and the kind of stubbornness that can look a lot like optimism, depending on the day. I was always the responsible kid, the one you could count on, and I suppose that stuck with me as I grew older. I've worked as a marketing specialist for almost a decade now. I love the creativity, the challenge of the job, and the late afternoon coffee breaks with my colleagues. I'm the kind of person who believes birthdays should be celebrated, that Sunday pancakes are sacred, and that every dog deserves at least 3 belly rubs a day. On the outside, my life looked almost textbook. A pretty house with blue shutters on a quiet street, a golden retriever named Max, 2 children who make my heart swell with pride, and a husband who was admired by our friends for his charm and his career success. I was the woman who organized the neighborhood potlucks, volunteered at my kids' school, and always remembered to send thank you notes. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I missed the warning signs, because I wanted so badly for the picture to stay perfect. Or maybe I just believed, at my core, in the goodness of people, especially the person I love the most. Either way, this is the story of how that certainty unraveled, and what I did when it did. A marriage that seemed perfect. From the outside looking in, our married life probably read like the opening lines of a Hallmark card. John and I celebrated our 12th anniversary this June, and for most of those years, I really believed we had carved out something steady and enviable. Our house in an old Seattle neighborhood was painted a classic navy with white trim, the kind families pause to admire at Christmas time. We hosted barbecue parties in the backyard, under strings of glowing Edison bulbs, our daughter Sophie chasing fireflies, while our son Ben giggled on the porch swing. Every morning was a small dance. John reading tech news over coffee, while I prepped lunches, the kids bickering over who got the last blueberry muffin. At night, when the house grew quiet, we'd sink into our soft blue couch, watch TV, and talk about everything and nothing. Those everyday routines, the low stakes, loving noise, felt like proof that we were doing marriage right. John made life feel secure. He worked hard, talked about the future, flirted with me in the kitchen while cooking pasta, and never once forgot our anniversary. I can still picture our trips, long car rides along the Oregon coast, family photos with windblown hair and sand in our shoes. Whenever my friends would drop by unannounced, they'd leave calling me lucky. And, if I'm honest, I agreed with them. We built traditions, Taco Tuesdays, snow days filled with pillow forts and hot chocolate, little handwritten notes tucked in briefcases and lunchboxes. The hardest days were folded gently into the best ones. Looking back now, I realize I clung to those small gestures, the unspoken promise that we were a team. I believed in forever, and I believed John did too, without reservation. No one could have convinced me otherwise. Not then. To everyone who knew us, we were the couple others said they wanted to become someday, blissfully unaware how thin the line was between comfort and complacency. The harsh truth revealed. There's a faint, almost cinematic quality to the way some memories carve themselves into your bones. For me, the moment it all shifted didn't begin as anything dramatic, just an ordinary Thursday in October. The air outside was brisk, leaves spinning in orange and red spirals across our yard, and the house smelled faintly of cinnamon from the apple bars I'd baked the night before. I remember the way Mark had left for work that morning, rushed but smiling, pecking me on the cheek, grabbing his travel mug, yelling goodbye to the kids as he dodged their backpacks. He and I had exchanged texts throughout the day, the kind of everyday chatter married people share. A meme about busy lives, a reminder to pick up milk, him asking when Sophie's piano recital was. Nothing about it felt off. Nothing ever did, until suddenly, everything did. That afternoon, as I was folding laundry and listening to an old Counting Crows album, I noticed Mark's phone vibrating on the kitchen counter. It wasn't an unusual occurrence. He was always forgetting his phone, wallet, keys. But this time, my gaze snagged on the screen. A new message had popped up, accompanied by a name that sent an odd, cold twist through my stomach. Jamie Carter. Jamie and I had met through Mark's office. She was sharp, energetic, the kind of person everyone wants at their dinner party. We'd double-dated, laughed over cocktails, even exchanged Christmas gifts. I trusted her. We'd swapped parenting horror stories and inside jokes about the chaos at Mark's workplace. I'd never questioned her friendship with Mark, because distrust just wasn't part of my natural wiring. I tried to dismiss it, but something, some sixth sense, honed by years of marriage, buzzed in the back of my mind. Maybe it was the frequency of her name in our shared stories lately, or the way I'd caught Mark grinning at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. I wish I'd acted on my doubts sooner, but I'd always believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. That belief, it turns out, was a luxury I'd soon lose. At first, I did the things so many spouses do. I told myself not to overthink. I finished my chores. I ran errands. When I picked up Mark's phone again, hours later, it was because he asked me to send a document for work. No big deal. Only the message preview was still there. And against my better judgment, I unlocked the phone. What happened next is stamped in my memory with a precision I wish I could forget. Message after message, all from Jamie. At first, just words that seemed friendly. Then slowly, words that weren't. Flirty jokes, in-jokes I'd never heard before. Photos from nights out she'd said she was too busy to join us for. Then deeper, more intimate comments. Plans made far outside office hours. My hands shook, scrolling through months of digital fingerprints, spelling out a betrayal that seemed both banal and catastrophic. My mind raced back, over years of birthdays and get-togethers, holidays spent building gingerbread houses beside Jamie's grinning kids and my own. The casual way Mark had reassured me, the way Jamie had looked me straight in the eye. I heard, in the echo chamber of my head, every kind word, every promise, every shared laugh, all violently recast in the harsh, uncanny light of their secret. My immediate reaction wasn't anger. Not yet. It was nauseating disbelief, then a numbing sense of detachment. I texted Mark, pretending nothing was wrong. I set the phone down, finished making dinner, helped our daughter with homework. But inside, every detail of normalcy shattered. Every smile, every "how was your day?" felt like something I'd borrowed from someone else. That night, I lay beside Mark in our familiar bed, listening to the cadence of his breathing and wondering if he was dreaming about her, about them, about a life I'd been cut out of without my consent. I watched ceiling shadows crawl across the room and tried to recall at what point our marriage had split into two narratives, one that played out in the open, the other hiding just out of sight. In the following days, I began to notice odd little gaps everywhere. The way Mark lingered before coming home. The fact that Jamie had stopped texting me altogether. Each clue was a puzzle piece that, once obvious, wouldn't let me look away. I replayed conversations in my mind, picking apart pauses, stray glances, half-truths. If you've ever had your reality upended in a single afternoon, you'll know the particular brand of heartbreak that's both raw and relentless. I didn't confront Mark, not yet. I needed to know exactly what had happened, and for how long. In secret, I started to gather evidence. Screenshots, emails, calendar invites that didn't fit, receipts for coffee shops and hotel bars. Each new discovery felt like pressing on a bruise. Outside, I played my part. The patient wife, the friendly neighbor, the mom who still remembered to send in cupcakes for the bake sale. Inside, I was a tangle of grief, humiliation, and cold, clear resolve. The Allison who had believed in happily ever after had been replaced by someone calculating, quiet, and shockingly composed. It's strange how quickly you can adjust to a parallel life, smiling at your kids in the kitchen while your mind races ahead to plans you never thought you'd be making. That was the moment the enormity of the betrayal truly settled in, not in the shriek of confrontation or the flash of anger, but in the silent, steady accumulation of truth. I understood then that nothing about my marriage was unbreakable, and that if anyone was going to decide what happened next, it had to be me. Silent suffering and a plan for revenge. The days that followed blurred together, cast in a dull ache I couldn't quite shake. Grief lived in my bones, but so did a cold, blue flame of focus. I decided early on not to confront Michael right away. A confrontation would only give him a chance to lie, to twist the narrative, or worse, to warn Samantha. Instead, I gathered evidence with the methodical patience of someone who has nothing left to lose. Each morning, I presented the face everyone expected: friendly, involved, reliable. I drove the kids to soccer, joined work Zoom calls with my practiced smile, and baked casserole for a neighbor who just had surgery. Every bit of normalcy was armor, a way to keep the truth hidden long enough for me to build my case. Late at night, I pored over Michael's emails, bank records, and calendar invites on our shared computer, details that had always been communal, never protected by suspicion. I screenshotted receipts from hotel bars and imported photos from cloud accounts he'd forgotten were shared. I logged every piece of evidence like a case file, never letting myself cry until the house was completely dark and quiet. What surprised me most was not the anger, but the clarity. I thought revenge would be some wild, fiery thing. But for me, it was almost clinical. A matter of restoring balance, of protecting my children, my dignity, and the truth. I refused to spiral or make a scene. My greatest weapon, I realized, was silence. The quiet accumulation of facts, the patience to wait for the perfect moment, and the certainty that I would not be the victim when the dust settled. Inside, I replayed every injustice, every time Michael and Samantha had looked me in the eye and lied. But outwardly, I remained supportive and attentive, so no one would suspect a thing. I confided in a single friend, my sister Jill, sharing pieces of the story late at night on the phone, her quiet rage echoing my own. She reminded me that dignity is sometimes the only thing you have left to control. I began to formulate my plan. I would not only expose their affair, but ensure that it happened in a way neither of them could recover from. No shouting, no smashed plates, no public breakdowns. Instead, every piece of evidence would be brought to light before the people whose opinions mattered to them most: our friends, our families, and, perhaps most importantly, at their shared workplace, a company that prided itself on integrity. I researched company policy on fraternizing and reviewed the legalities of my situation. Carefully, I lined up my evidence, made discrete backups, and considered when, where, and how I would turn the tide. More than anything, I wanted Michael and Samantha to feel, if only for a moment, the betrayal and isolation they had imposed on me. Through all of this, I clung to the routines that reminded me I was still myself. I tucked my children into bed, went for early morning jogs down rain-slicked streets, treated myself to strong coffee and new hardcover novels. I refused to let their choices define my future. Some nights, I allowed myself a sliver of hope, not for reconciliation, but for freedom. My pain would not last forever. When the storm finally broke, I intended to walk away with my head high, knowing that the silence I'd kept had been my greatest ally, and my refusal to break had been the first step toward healing. The perfect confrontation, the day I finally pulled the veil away, was John's birthday, and it felt oddly appropriate. For weeks, I'd orchestrated every detail, feigning normalcy while preparing for the single moment that would rewire every relationship in the room, maybe in my whole world. I'd decided this wouldn't be a showdown behind closed doors. It would be the type of reckoning no lies could escape, in front of the people whose judgment John valued most. The sky was low and gray, rain tapping in gentle rhythms on the windows as guests filtered into our house. A seamless blend of family, longtime friends, and co-workers, including, of course, the centerpiece pair of the double betrayal, John and Jamie. I wore my most reassuring smile, extending pleasantries, shepherding conversations, guiding wine glasses safely away from kid-spilled juice. The air buzzed with laughter and well wishes. I moved about the kitchen as if nothing were amiss, assembling the last touches on John's favorite lemon cake and answering questions about PTA fundraisers, all while knowing it was the last time I'd ever play this version of myself. Jill gave me a subtle nod from across the room, a small, silent anchor. At the heart of my plan was an innocuous album I announced after dinner, standing in the center of the living room. I thought it would be fun to look back at some memories we've all shared. I said, my voice light, steady, the gentle lie flowing as naturally as breath. Everyone crowded closer, plates piled with cake, drinks in hand. John took his usual seat on the couch, Jamie beside him, a little too close, though no one seemed to notice but me. The screen flickered to life with photos, family vacations, holidays, happy moments projected up high for all to see. The mood was warm, nostalgic. Then, seamlessly, the photos shifted. Texts between John and Jamie, screenshots of hotel confirmations, maps of evening, detours, calendar invites marked in code. At first, laughter faltered, then faded. The room stilled. Every set of eyes flickered from the images to the two faces at the center of it all. Faces that drained of color, postures collapsing inward. The kids, puzzled and silent, looked to me for clarity. John's parents gasped. Some friends stifled curses. Jamie stammered, pushing herself upright as if that could undo the avalanche. John's mouth opened, then shut. Fingers curled in guilt and fear. The silence that followed held a lifetime's worth of heartbreaks. The collective realization that the couple they'd trusted, even admired, had built their happiness on deception. I watched the moment land in real time, the fissures running through every relationship in the room. Some people welled with sympathy, others looked away in embarrassment or anger. I spoke once, softly. I thought everyone deserved to see the full story. I'm sorry, it's not the one we all wanted. What I remember most is the quiet. Not drama, no screaming, just an endless, hollow quiet as people gathered their things and left, some with hugs, others with averted eyes. Jill stayed by my side, her presence steady, a reminder that truth is not always gentle, but always necessary. John tried to speak, voice trembling, but I stopped him with a shake of my head. There was nothing left to defend, no apology, powerful enough to glue the fragments together. Jamie, in tears, fled through the front door, the party dissolving behind her. Later, after the house emptied, I sat on the couch in the hollowed-out quiet. Max, sensing the shift, curled up next to me, head heavy on my lap. The kids, confused and silent, hovered in the doorway, unsure if the world would ever right itself. I gathered them close, whispering reassurances I only half believed. "We're going to be okay," I said, voice steadier than my heart. In the days after, the truth unfurled like a storm. Friends called, some offering solace, others simply drifting away. John was summoned at work to explain the scandal. Jamie resigned under pressure, her reputation destroyed alongside his. Our family's secrets became workplace whispers and neighborhood legend. John and I agreed to separate. I insisted.
What is this?
Heartbreak, grief, anger, all came in waves. But what remained was my simple, unyielding pride that I had chosen not just to survive, but to face the truth, and to do so with my children beside me. Consequences for the traitor. Looking back now, I realized that exposing John and Jamie wasn't the end of the story. Far from it. The fallout unraveled in slow motion. And if I thought shock and heartbreak were the hardest to survive, I hadn't yet understood the shattering reach of consequences. News of the confrontation at the party spread through our network like wildfire. Whispers traveled faster than the truth itself. Within hours, former confidants, colleagues, and friends caught wind of what had happened in my living room that night. It wasn't long before social circles recalibrated. Some people avoiding us entirely, others calling in frantic disbelief, trying to piece together their own understanding of what had unfolded. The phone rang so much in the days after, I started leaving it on silent, just to preserve a shred of peace. John was the first to feel the full force of the consequences. At work, where he'd built his reputation brick by brick for more than a decade, rumor became indignation with startling speed. His boss, once a family friend, now tight-lipped, called him into a private meeting the week following the party. I can imagine John sitting across from him, hearing the words, integrity, company image, and breach of policy chiseled out between steepled fingers and averted eyes. Jamie, too, faced the fire. Her emails went unanswered. Group chats she'd animated for years turned strangely silent. Her name no longer mentioned at lunch tables or happy hours. The company had always touted its zero-tolerance policies on workplace affairs, especially between managers and direct reports. When HR began investigating, it was only a matter of time before official action was taken. Jamie took an extended leave of absence, though everyone knew what that really meant. Within a week, she was quietly let go, her desk cleared after hours, all traces of her wiped out as if she'd never been there at all. What surprised me most was how quickly our tight-knit community responded, almost instinctively, by closing ranks. Parents at school drop-off barely met John's eyes. Invitations that normally flooded our calendar dried up overnight. Even our closest friends seemed uncomfortable, calls brief, and voices strained. A handful reached out to me, some with awkward sympathy, a few with blunt anger on my behalf. But most simply faded away into the periphery, unsure what to say or how to act, worried that betrayal might be contagious. The kids, of course, took notice. Sophie asked me one evening, her face crumpled with worry, why Daddy hadn't come to her choir recital. Ben, always more sensitive, started having trouble sleeping, no longer bouncing out of bed, but lingering as if he could delay the next day's truths. I tried to shield them as best I could, repeating the same calming words I needed to hear myself. We're going to get through this together. John and I spoke less and less as the days turned into weeks. Where once there had been comfortable silence, now there was a kind of emptiness, heavy and unresolved. He would apologize, sometimes tearfully, sometimes with a hollow weariness that said he hardly expected forgiveness. But even in his remorse, it was clear. Something between us had been irreparably shattered. Too far gone for patched-up promises. Jamie, whose friendship I'd once counted as a pillar of my adult life, vanished from the social landscape entirely. I found her absence to be both a relief and a strange, new ache. I caught myself mourning the woman I thought I'd known, grieving not only for my marriage, but for the other sisterhoods that had been collateral damage in their betrayal. Every time I saw her children at school, glancing down shyly or stubbornly looking away, a fresh wave of sadness crashed over me. The practicalities of disaster are so mundane, aren't they? Bank accounts to divide, possessions to inventory, custody lawyers to consult. We lived in the same house longer than I would have liked, passing each other with polite, aching civility, ghostly roommates sharing meals, intense silence, organizing kid drop-offs and play dates as if handling evidence. It wasn't anger that filled that space. It was exhaustion and a kind of cold resolve on my part not to let this mess define me forever. But beyond my own heartbreak, I watched as John, once so self-assured, crumbled under the weight of consequences he'd never anticipated. He lost not only his job, but his sense of standing in a community that had looked up to him for years. Old friends stopped returning his calls. His parents, devastated, traveled to visit the kids, but refused to stay under the same roof as their son. The neighborhood we'd both called home suddenly felt foreign, as if every glance held a question. Every sidewalk conversation was an improvised audition for normalcy. Meanwhile, Jamie tried to leave town. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she'd moved in with a cousin 2 states away, hoping to start fresh. But even from a distance, the ripples of her choices lingered, and her absence left an unmistakable vacancy in her children's lives. Sometimes, in quieter moments, I wondered what she thought of the wreckage. If she lay awake, replaying her own justifications, or if she, too, felt the hollow ache that comes from being suddenly, utterly alone. Eventually, even the gossip quieted. Fresh drama captured the neighborhood's attention. New faces moved in next door, and the world kept spinning, indifferent to any single family's unraveling. But for those of us at the center of the storm, the consequences didn't fade. They simply became the background hum of our new normal. For myself, I found a strange kind of freedom in the aftermath. Not peace, not yet, but a hard-earned self-respect. Every time I walked into a room, head held high, refusing to shrink or apologize for someone else's shame, I felt a little stronger. And while I'll always carry scars from this betrayal, I also carry the knowledge that I survived it with dignity, honesty, and a stone-solid heart that grew, piece by piece, back into something whole. Freedom and costly lessons. Starting over after the storm of betrayal was never part of my plan, but freedom rarely comes in packages we expect. In the early days after John and I separated, my entire life felt like a house after a hurricane. some walls still standing, others reduced to scattered fragments. Some mornings, I woke up oddly weightless, marveling at how the sun could rise just as golden as it ever had, even as everything around me had changed. Other days, small things would trigger tsunamis of grief. An empty chair at breakfast, the faint, lingering scent of John's cologne on an old sweatshirt he'd left behind, the echo of Jamie's laugh in places she would never visit again. But the truth is, after the chaos, a gradual sort of peace began to take root. At first, it was just the quiet, the blessed, almost sacred hush that comes when you're no longer straining to be perfect, no longer hiding wounds. Grief leaned against me like a familiar companion. But so did a new kind of hope, timid, uncertain, but persistent all the same. I threw myself into routines with my children. Our days were more unpredictable, sometimes acutely awkward, but there was sincerity in this messy, unscripted life. I learned the art of letting go, of controlling outcomes, of rehearsing happiness, of collecting every crumb of regret. Instead, I focused on being present. We ate dinner around the table and let the silence be just silence. When Sophie had nightmares, I lay beside her until her breathing slowed. I took Ben hiking on weekends, letting him scramble up trails, his laughter bouncing off the trees. Their resilience amazed me. Sometimes, in their eyes, I glimpsed the best parts of myself, stronger than the pain that threatened to drown us all. As the weeks blurred into months, the practicalities of freedom took shape. I set up meetings with lawyers and accountants, divided assets, and negotiated custody. Unromantic tasks that felt both intimidating and oddly empowering. I rented a small place for the three of us, closer to work and Sophie's school. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen tiles were chipped, and the backyard was a patch of stubborn weeds. But it was ours, and the first evening we spent there. Pizza boxes on the floor, laughter echoing off bare walls. I felt something that almost hurt in its brightness. Possibility. In solitude, truths have nowhere to hide. I reflected, often painfully, on my marriage, on the ambition that drove John, and the vulnerabilities he never let anyone see. On my own need for approval, on the ways Jamie's betrayal cut doubly deep because I had let her so close. I questioned everything, my worth, my judgment, whether forgiveness, of them, of myself, was even possible. I had days where every misstep replayed in my head, days when guilt gnawed at the edge of every accomplishment, and nights when I lay awake, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. But I also discovered pieces of myself I'd forgotten. I remembered how fiercely I loved to read, falling into novels that had nothing to do with making anyone proud. I let myself try new things. Salsa lessons with a friend from work, solo trips to the farmer's market where I bought flowers just for me. I stayed up late, watching old movies, laughing out loud all alone, amazed at how freedom could feel as exhilarating as it did lonely. Through therapy, something I once would have dismissed as weakness, I began to untangle the story I'd been telling myself for years. That mistakes define you. That happiness is a reward for never slipping up. That the only measure of success is how seamlessly you fit in. One afternoon, my therapist asked me, what would it mean if you gave yourself permission to be happy again, even if the story didn't end the way you'd planned? That question became my quiet companion, reminding me that healing wasn't about erasing scars, but learning to live joyfully with them. The biggest lesson, the one I return to day after day, is that strength doesn't always roar. It is often the silent refusal to give up hope, the decision not to be hardened by betrayal. It's showing up with vulnerability for your kids and yourself, No matter how bruised you feel, it's seeking connection, reaching out to an old friend for coffee, leaning on your sister in the dark hours, asking for the help you used to think you had to earn. Forgiveness, too, has become part of my freedom. Not for John or Jamie, though somewhere down the line, maybe I'll get there. But for myself, for not catching the signs sooner, for believing too deeply in happy endings, for all the ways I tried to fix things that weren't mine to fix. Self-compassion isn't easy for those of us who've made caretaking a habit, but gradually, I learned to extend the same kindness to myself that I gave to everyone else. What remains, after all is swept away, is a life built back on smaller, sturdier truths. I wake up early, sipping coffee by the window, feeling gratitude for the patchwork piece I've stitched together. My home is full of laughter again. Not the brittle, hurried laughter of denial, but the loud, raucous kind you don't care to hide from the neighbors. My children blossom in unexpected ways. Sophie writes poetry. Ben fixes broken toys for younger kids on our street. We are, in some wobbly but determined way, whole again. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of John in the school parking lot, older and thinner. Even his smile changed. There are days when I wish things had been different, when regret knocks a little too loudly at my door. But mostly, I feel a fierce, quiet pride for having walked through fire and come out, if not unscathed, then undeniably alive. The price of freedom was steep, but the lesson is one I now teach my children every chance I get. You are not defined by someone else's betrayal. You are not the sum of another person's choices. Every day you wake up and choose honesty, kindness, and hope, you are winning back your life, piece by piece, joy by hard-won joy.